Have you ever had a moment of silence that grew so large it consumed everything else? A pause that should have been filled with words, important words, but instead stretched empty between two people. It's just a sentence. 8 small words spoken in a hospital room that I let hang in the air without response. But since that day, that silence has become the loudest sound in my world. My name is Nathan. I'm 48, and this begins on a Wednesday afternoon in February. The kind where winter seems endless, where grey skies press down on grey buildings, where even the hospital's fluorescent lights can't quite push back the gloom. The kind of day that feels heavy with unspoken things. The kind you'd never mark as significant until it becomes the dividing line of your life. Mom had been in the hospital for 11 days. Nothing dramatic, a fall in her kitchen, a broken hip that required surgery. Routine for someone in their 70s, the doctors assured me. A few weeks of recovery, then rehabilitation, then home with some temporary help. Nothing to worry about. I visited every day, though never for as long as I should have. There was always work waiting, clients expecting calls, emails needing responses, meetings scheduled back to back. I was in the middle of the biggest case of my career, the partnership I'd been working toward for 15 years, finally within reach. I couldn't afford distractions. "Your mother understands," my wife Julie would say when she saw me checking my watch during visits. "She knows how important this case is." And Mom did understand. She always had. Never complained when I missed Sunday dinners because of work. Never made me feel guilty when I couldn't make it to her birthday celebration until dessert was already being served. Never expected more than I felt able to give. That Wednesday, I arrived at the hospital around 4, later than I'd planned. I'd meant to come at lunch, but a client call ran long, then another issue needed immediate attention, and suddenly the afternoon was nearly gone. Mum was sitting up in bed when I entered, hair combed neatly, reading glasses perched on her nose, book open in her lap. She looked up when the door opened, her face brightening in that way it always did when she saw me, as if my arrival was the best part of her day, regardless of how late I was. "There's my boy," she said, setting her book aside. "Sorry I'm late," I replied, not for the first time that week. "Got caught up with the Westlake merger." "Important stuff," she nodded, understanding as always. "Tell me about it." So I did, settling into the vinyl chair beside her bed, launching into the details of my work, the complications of the deal, the brilliance of my strategy. She listened attentively, asking questions in all the right places, proud of my accomplishments, even when she didn't quite follow all the legal terminology. I barely asked about her day, about how she was feeling, about whether the physical therapist had come by as scheduled. There would be time for that, I thought. There was always tomorrow. After 20 minutes, half the time I'd promised myself I'd stay, I glanced at my watch. "Need to get going?" she asked, noticing the gesture. "I should check in with the office," I admitted. "Just to make sure nothing's exploded while I've been away." She nodded, folding her hands in her lap. "Of course." I stood, gathering my coat and briefcase. "I'll try to come by earlier tomorrow. Maybe bring lunch." "That would be nice." Her voice was soft. "Though don't trouble yourself if you're busy. I know how it is with these big cases." I was already checking my phone, scrolling through notifications that had accumulated during our brief visit. 3 emails from the senior partner, a text from Julie about dinner plans, a reminder about tomorrow morning's deposition prep. "Nathan," Mom said, her voice different somehow, more deliberate. I replied, not looking up from my screen. "I've been thinking," she continued. "When I get out of here, I might look into those senior apartments we talked about last year, the ones near your house." That caught my attention. Mom had been fiercely independent since Dad passed, refusing to consider downsizing from the family home despite its stairs, despite the maintenance, despite living alone. "Really?" I looked up finally. "What changed your mind?" She smoothed the blanket over her lap, a gesture I'd seen 1,000 times when she was choosing her words carefully. "This fall made me realize I'm not as steady as I used to be," she admitted. And the house is so empty now. Too many rooms I don't use, too many memories. I nodded, surprised but relieved. I'd been trying to convince her to move for years, worried about her managing alone, but never having enough time to help as much as I should. That sounds sensible, I said. We can look into it once you're recovered. She nodded, but seemed to be waiting for something more. When I didn't continue, she spoke again, her voice even quieter. I know I've been difficult about this before. Stubborn, I suppose. She gave a small smile. Your father always said I had enough stubbornness for 3 people. You come by it honestly, I replied with a small smile, thinking of Dad and his equally immovable stance on certain matters. She hesitated. I didn't want to be a burden on you and Julie. I know how busy you are, how important your work is. I thought I could manage on my own. You're not a burden, Mom, I said automatically, the words coming easily because they were expected, not because I'd truly considered their meaning. She looked directly at me then, her eyes, so like my own, searching my face. I'm sorry if I was a burden, she said softly, if my stubbornness has made things harder for you. The words hung in the air between us, weighted with years of unspoken feelings. Years when I'd felt torn between my responsibilities to her and to my career. Years when I'd resented her needs, her loneliness, her occasional reliance on me as her only child. I should have told her she was never a burden, that caring for her was an honor, not an obligation, that I was sorry for all the times I'd put work before her, that I wished I could be the son she deserved. I should have said something, anything, to fill the silence that stretched between us, but my phone buzzed in my hand. A call from the senior partner, the one I'd been waiting for all day. I looked at the screen, then back at Mom. She nodded in understanding, the way she always did. Take it, she said. It's important. I stepped into the hallway to answer, promising myself I'd address her apology when I returned. We'd have a real conversation. I'd make sure she knew she wasn't a burden. But the call lasted longer than expected. Complications with the merger, documents needing immediate review. By the time I finished, visiting hours were nearly over, and I had a dinner meeting across town in 45 minutes. I poked my head back into her room. Mum, I've got to run. There's an emergency with the case. She had picked up her book again, glasses back on her nose. Of course, dear. Go do what you need to do. Tomorrow, okay? We'll talk more tomorrow, I promise. She smiled, that patient smile of hers. Tomorrow. I hurried out, already dialing Julie to tell her I'd be late. Again. Already thinking about the documents I needed to review before morning. Already forgetting the conversation we'd left unfinished. My phone rang at 3:17 a.m. I remember checking the time as I fumbled for it in the darkness. Julie stirring beside me. Unknown number, but with the hospital's area code. Mr. Mitchell, a voice I didn't recognize. This is Nurse Patel from Memorial Hospital. Something in her tone sent ice through my veins. Your mother has experienced a sudden decline. The doctor thinks you should come in as soon as possible. The drive to the hospital exists in my memory as fragments, streetlights reflecting off wet pavement. The radio playing softly, some late-night talk show I didn't bother to turn off. Julie's hand on my knee, steadying. We were too late. She went peacefully, the doctor told us in that gentle voice they must practice in medical school. Sometimes after surgery, especially in older patients, there can be complications that aren't immediately apparent. Words that were meant to comfort, but felt hollow in the face of the ultimate silence that now stretched between my mother and me. I stood by her bed, long after she was gone, after Julie had stepped out to make necessary calls, after the nurses had removed the tubes and monitors, leaving her looking almost as if she was sleeping. I'm sorry if I was a burden. Her last words to me, spoken in that quiet hospital room, words that deserved a response, a denial, an absolution, words I had let hang in the air, unanswered, because a phone call seemed more important. Now all my important words came too late, pouring out in that sterile room where she could no longer hear them. You were never a burden, Mom. Never. I was the burden, always too busy, always rushing, always putting everything else first. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. But apologies spoken into silence remain unheard. And some silences once created can never be filled. In the days that followed, I moved through the necessary rituals of loss, the funeral arrangements, the calls to distant relatives, the sorting of her belongings, each task underlining my failure to respond when it mattered most. Her bedroom closet still held Dad's winter coat, untouched in the 7 years since his passing. Her jewelry box contained the simple pearl earrings I had given her for her 60th birthday, worn so often the posts were slightly bent. Her refrigerator door held snapshots of me as a child, a teenager, a college graduate on my wedding day, arranged in a collage of maternal pride. In her desk drawer, I found a file labeled Senior Living Options. Inside were brochures for communities near my home, some with notes in her careful handwriting. Close to Nathan. Nice garden area. Reasonable cost. She had been researching for months, it seemed. Preparing to make the move she'd resisted for so long. And tucked inside one brochure was a handwritten note dated 2 weeks before her fall. I think it's time to stop being so stubborn. Nathan and Julie have their own lives, their own concerns. I don't want to become a burden as I get older. These apartments look nice, close enough for visits, but not so close that they'll feel obligated. I can still be independent but have help when needed. It's the right decision, though the house will be hard to leave behind. I sat at her kitchen table, the same table where we'd shared countless meals over the years, and wept. For all the conversations we'd never have. For all the times I'd hurried away from her, distracted by what I thought were more important matters, for my silence in response to her vulnerability. I'm sorry if I was a burden. Words that would echo in my mind forever, unanswered. Later that week, as we prepared to close up her house, Julie found a card on Mom's bedside table. It was addressed to me, unsealed. Inside, in Mom's familiar handwriting, Nathan, the doctors say I'll be coming home next week. I wanted to thank you for visiting every day, even with your busy schedule. I know how important your work is, and it means so much that you make time for your old mother. I've decided to take your advice about the senior apartments. It's time. I've held on to this house and all its memories for too long. Sometimes moving forward means letting go. I hope I haven't been too much trouble through all this. The last thing I ever wanted was to be a burden to you. You have your own life to live, your own family to care for. I'm so proud of the man you've become, of all you've accomplished. Your father would be too. All my love, Mom. She had written it the day before our last conversation. The day before I let her apology, her vulnerability, hang in the air unanswered. That night, I sat on the porch swing of her house, soon to be sold to strangers who would never know the life it had contained, and tried to imagine what I would have said if I'd known our time was so short. If I had realized the importance of that moment, if I had truly heard her, but the truth was I had heard her. I had simply chosen not to respond, had let a buzzing phone take precedence over her beating heart, had allowed silence to be my answer when words were desperately needed. It's been 9 months since that February day, 9 months of carrying that unanswered apology with me, of hearing it echo in quiet moments, of wishing I could go back and fill that silence with the words she deserved to hear. Fall has arrived, bringing with it Mom's favorite season. She loved the changing leaves, the crispness in the air, the excuse to bake apple pies and wear the hand-knit sweaters she'd collected over decades. This would have been her first autumn in the senior apartments. I imagine her on a small balcony instead of her familiar porch, watching the neighborhood children in their Halloween costumes, setting out a bowl of the good chocolate bars she always insisted on buying. The partnership I was working toward came through in April. The celebration dinner felt hollow, my achievement tarnished by the knowledge of what it had cost. How many moments with Mom had I sacrificed for this title on a business card? How many conversations had I cut short? How many silences had I allowed to grow between us? Julie noticed the change in me first. "You don't check your phone during dinner anymore," she observed one evening, reaching across the table to touch my hand. Some things are more important, I replied simply. My colleagues have noticed too. My new boundaries around work hours, my reluctance to take calls during family time, my insistence on actually using my vacation days. Some see it as a lack of commitment. Others assume it's the comfort of having finally reached the partnership I worked toward for so long. None of them understand that it's neither comfort nor disinterest, but a hard lesson learned too late. That no email is worth missing the chance to say what needs to be said. That no meeting is more important than being present for the people you love. That silence, when words are needed, can become the loudest regret. I've become hyper-aware of the things left unsaid in all my relationships. I tell Julie I love her every day, not just as a routine phrase, but with presence and meaning. I call my cousin who lives across the country, rebuilding a connection that had faded through neglect. I write letters, actual handwritten letters, to friends I've lost touch with over the years. My therapist, yes, I started seeing one, calls it complicated grief, intensified by the unresolved nature of our final interaction. She says many people carry similar regrets, words they wish they'd said, silences they wish they'd filled. You can't change that moment, she reminds me, but you can change how you approach every moment that comes after it. So I'm trying. Some days are harder than others. Some silences still feel impossible to fill. But I'm learning to speak when it matters, to stay present even when distractions call, to recognize the importance of moments while they're still happening. Last month was the anniversary of Dad's passing. In previous years I'd call Mom, check in briefly, perhaps send flowers, but rarely make the trip to visit the cemetery with her. Work was always too pressing, time always too scarce. This year I went alone. Stood before their shared headstone, her name now carved alongside his, and finally spoke all the words I should have said in that hospital room. You were never a burden, Mom. Never. You were a gift I took for granted. Your love, your patience, your understanding, I accepted them all without truly acknowledging their value. I let you believe your needs were an imposition, when in reality, I was the one failing to meet my responsibilities to you. The cemetery was quiet that afternoon, just the rustle of autumn leaves and distant traffic. No response to my words, just as there had been no response to her apology. But speaking them aloud felt necessary, even if only the wind heard them. On my way home, I stopped at the senior apartment she had planned to move into. Construction was complete now, the building open and occupied. I walked the grounds, trying to imagine her there, creating a new chapter of her life, being close enough for impromptu visits and Sunday dinners. One of the residents, an elderly woman walking her small dog, noticed me standing there. "Are you looking for someone, dear?" she asked. "No," I replied, "just remembering someone." She nodded with the understanding that comes from having lived long enough to accumulate losses. "That's most of what I do these days too," she said with a small smile. "The remembering gets sweeter with time." "Does it?" I wanted to ask. "Does the ache of words unspoken eventually fade? Does the echo of silence ever grow quieter?" But I just nodded and wished her a good afternoon. That evening, I found myself in Mom's kitchen, my kitchen now, though I still think of it as hers. The house hadn't sold yet, the real estate market slower than expected. In some ways, it was a relief, this reprieve from having to finally close the door on the home of my childhood. I was sorting through the last of her recipe cards, handwritten instructions for dishes I'd grown up eating, many passed down from her mother and grandmother. Each card bore notes in her neat script, Nathan's favorite. Good for company. Jim loved this one. At the back of the box, I found a recipe I didn't recognize. Celebration cake for Nathan's partnership. The ingredients and instructions for a chocolate layer cake, the kind she'd made for special occasions throughout my childhood. She had been planning to bake it for me when the partnership came through, assuming she'd be here to celebrate with me. I sat at the kitchen table, recipe card in hand, and felt the full weight of her absence crashing down again. All the future moments we would never share, all the words we would never exchange, all the silences that would never be filled. On impulse, I gathered the ingredients listed on the card. I wasn't much of a baker. Julie handled most of our cooking, but suddenly it felt crucial to follow Mom's instructions, to create something she had intended to make for me. The process was messier than Mom would have allowed. Flour dusted across the countertops, eggshells imperfectly separated, vanilla extract spilled in a fragrant puddle. But eventually, I slid a lopsided chocolate cake into the oven, set the timer according to her precise instructions, and waited. The scent that gradually filled the kitchen brought an unexpected wave of memory. Birthdays, graduations, Sunday dinners. Mom in her apron, wooden spoon in hand, letting me lick the batter from the bowl despite her concerns about raw eggs. Teaching me to level off measuring cups with the back of a knife. Letting me help frost the layers, never commenting on my uneven application. When the timer dinged, I removed the cake and set it to cool as directed. Then I mixed the frosting, chocolate with a hint of coffee, her secret ingredient, and assembled the dessert as best I could. The result was nothing like Mom's perfect creations, but it was recognizably her recipe brought to life through my amateur efforts. I took a photo and sent it to Julie. "Mom's chocolate cake, not pretty but smells amazing. Come share?" She arrived 30 minutes later, puzzled but supportive as always. "What brought this on?" she asked as I cut 2 generous slices. I showed her the recipe card with its title. She was going to make this for me, for the partnership. Julie read the card, then looked at me with damp eyes. "Oh, Nathan." "I never told her she wasn't a burden," I said, the words spilling out suddenly. She apologized for being difficult, for needing help, and I said nothing. I let her think that's how I saw her, as an obligation, an inconvenience. "She knew you loved her," Julie said softly, taking my hand across the table. "One moment of silence doesn't erase a lifetime of love." "Doesn't it, though?" I asked. "Don't our final interactions carry more weight? Don't they color everything that came before?" Julie considered this, her thumb tracing circles on my palm. "I think last moments matter, but they're not the only moments that matter." She squeezed my hand. "Your mother knew who you were, Nathan, not just in that hospital room, but across your whole life together." We ate the cake in thoughtful silence. It was good, not as good as Mom's would have been, but recognizably her recipe, her flavor profile, her creation, even through my inexpert execution. "I keep hearing it," I admitted finally, her voice saying those words. "I'm sorry if I was a burden." And then, nothing. Just silence. My silence. "Then maybe you need to fill that silence," Julie suggested. "Not with apologies or regret, but with something else. Something that honors her." The idea took root slowly. Over the next few weeks, as autumn deepened toward winter, I began to consider what that something else might be. I started with her recipe cards, organizing them into a proper book, adding notes about the memories associated with each dish. I interviewed her friends from church, her bridge club companions, her neighbors, collecting stories I'd never heard, seeing facets of her I'd never fully appreciated. I learned that she had volunteered weekly at a local literacy program, helping adults learn to read, something she'd never mentioned to me. That she had been the emergency contact for 3 elderly neighbors, checking on them during storms and cold snaps. That after Dad died, she had quietly established a small scholarship at the community college where he had taught for 30 years. "Your mother was always helping someone," her closest friend Margaret told me over coffee. "Never made a fuss about it. Just saw what needed doing and did it." Why didn't I know about any of this? I wondered aloud. Margaret considered me with kind, but knowing eyes. "Did you ever ask?" The question hit me like a physical blow. Had I ever really asked about her life, her interests, her days when I wasn't present? Or had I been so consumed with my own pursuits that I'd reduced her to a supporting character in my story, rather than recognizing her as the protagonist of her own? Last week, I finally made a decision about the house. Instead of selling it, I contacted a local family services organization that helps young single mothers establish independence. The house would become transitional housing, a place where women and their children could stay while getting on their feet, learning life skills, finding employment. The Eleanor Mitchell Home, the director suggested when I proposed the donation. A place where no one feels like a burden. The name brought tears to my eyes. Yes, I managed. That's perfect. Yesterday was the official dedication ceremony. A small gathering, representatives from the organization, a few of Mom's friends, Julie and I. A modest plaque beside the front door, bearing her name and a simple phrase, a place of welcome and new beginnings. As the small crowd dispersed, I lingered on the porch where Mom had sat every evening in her wicker chair, waving to neighbors, watching the neighborhood children play, where she'd taught me to snap green beans into a bowl on summer afternoons, where she'd waited up for me countless nights during my teenage years, never scolding, just relieved to see me home safe. I sat in her chair, feeling the familiar creak of its joints, and closed my eyes. In the quiet, I could almost hear her voice again. Those 8 words that had haunted me for months. I'm sorry if I was a burden. But this time, in my mind, I responded differently. Not with silence, not with distraction, but with the truth she deserved to hear. You were never a burden, Mom. You were a gift. Every moment with you was precious, even when I was too blind to see it. Your love shaped me. Your patience taught me. Your life inspired me. And I promise from this moment forward to live in a way that honors all you gave me. The silence that followed wasn't the empty void that had echoed in my mind for months. It was a different kind of silence, peaceful, accepting, perhaps even healing. I don't know if she can hear me now. I don't know if my belated words reach wherever she has gone. But I know that by transforming her home into a sanctuary for others who might feel like burdens, who might need to hear that they are in fact worthy of care and time and attention, I've begun to answer her in the only way still available to me. And while I can't go back and fill that silence in the hospital room, I can ensure that her legacy speaks loudly into the silence she left behind, that her spirit of nurturing continues through the home that will now shelter others, that her concern for never being a burden transforms into an assurance for others that their needs are valid, their presence valuable. The silence still comes sometimes, in quiet moments, in empty rooms, in the space where her voice should be, but it's no longer the only thing I hear. Now, I also hear the echo of her love in the stories her friends share, the wisdom of her choices in the recipes she left behind, the impact of her quiet generosity in the lives she touched without fanfare or recognition. And most importantly, I hear my own voice finally responding to her across the divide of time and loss. You were never a burden, Mom. Never. You were the greatest gift of my life. It's too late for her to hear those words, but it's not too late for me to live them, to ensure that I never again let silence be my answer when someone needs to hear they matter, that I never again let a buzzing phone drown out the beating heart beside me, that I never again fail to recognize the sacred importance of being present, being attentive, being responsive to the people I love. Because some silences once created can never be filled, but others can be prevented if only we recognize the moment for what it is, an opportunity to say what matters while we still have the chance to say it. So if someone apologizes to you for being a burden, please don't respond with silence. Tell them they are valued, tell them they matter, tell them that care goes both ways in the relationships that truly count, because one day, silence might be all you have left. And trust me, there is no sound more deafening than the words you wish you'd said when you had the chance to say them.